Mentor Group, an exclusive membership for mentorship. You are streaming live with the Thrive Tribe, the #1 talk show for thriving women. And here's your host, Andrea Bowenzi.
And hello, I am Sabrina Project, filling in from Andrea Bowenzi. I'm coming to you live from Tampa, Florida, here with our Thrive Tribe. Thank you for tuning in to the #1 talk show for thriving women. We call ourselves a Thrive Tribe because we represent women just like you that are progressing, flourishing, and thriving. Our mission each week is to inspire and to empower our listeners to thrive, not just survive on your life's journey. Let's take a moment to introduce you to our Thrive Tribe. We have Stacy Soley, our menopause coach out of Palm Harbor, Florida, thriving businesswomen correspondent Dana Washington, real estate investor. We have Brandy Taylor, franchise owner of I Mac and Cheese out of Augusta, Georgia. Our guest co-host today is Gina Marie Casano. She's a certified TCM transformational master coach, and Rebecca Rayana Sang, success coach and health coach institute, and Abby Merkel, owner of A&M Design and Services. Welcome, ladies, to Thriving Women. We're excited to have you on our show. Thriving Women continues to support and recognize scientists, doctors, nurses, firemen, policemen, and first responders that wake up every morning around the world to serve and protect us while we continue to do our part as we shelter in place. We want to thank all of our local and national and international listeners tuning in to Thriving Women. Well, we have a hot topic today. Our topic for today is 10 things white people can do for racial injustice. This was inspired by hundreds and thousands of people that are gathering across continents. They're protesting racism, police brutality. I mean, this is very historic, and it's been sparked by the U.S. police killing of George Floyd. Many of our citizens across the U.S. have lifted, as they begin to lift the coronavirus pandemic curfews, this weekend saw the largest number of demonstrations yet. While those outside of the U.S., you've seen they've mobilized in solidarity with American protesters. Many wish to oppose and highlight this systematic racism and violence that law enforcement seems to have around our own nation. We have a special treat for you today. Our co-host, Stacy Soley, was inspired to take this social injustice issue of racism a step further. Stacy, can you share with our listeners what was different about George Floyd's death that inspired you to create this panel? And please take a moment and introduce our guest. Stacy?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sabrina. And I know this is such, a topic that can really divide and polarize people. And I think because we were, in our homes more than we would have been before, due to the pandemic, I think this really affected, at least for me on a personal level, just because I was at home and it's just so much more able to see all the different social media. And what I really realized was that I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to put on social media. I was afraid of saying the wrong things. And I started to realize some of the things that maybe, even though I was, I consider myself to be inclusive and surrounding myself with, the Thrive Tribe and, being culturally diverse, I realized maybe I didn't quite have the tools necessary to have an open conversation. And so that's really where this passion came from, is I started researching and reaching out to my Black mentors and friends and seeing, what else can we do to be able to support. So that's where my passion came from, and I just started speaking up and researching, and I asked 3 of my friends to join me here, and I know it's so brave of them. They've not been on a radio show, and then to be talking about such a hot topic, I just really am so grateful that they said yes. So we have as we talked about, we have Abby Merkel, and she's in Lithia, Florida, and I met her through a networking group, and she is the owner and graphic designer at AM Designs and Services. And then Gina Casano, and she is a relationship coach helping people to connect. And I went through the same coaching program and also coach with her. And she's a member with the Health Coach Institute like I am, along with Rihanna as well. And she's in California, and she works with women struggling with overwhelm and burnout so that they can feel luscious in their minds and bodies again. So these three women are all entrepreneurs, and they're all really working to help improve not only their own businesses, but the lives of others. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, Stacy, thank you. Thank you for leaning in on this topic and holding each one of us accountable for change. So let's take a minute. We're going to take a minute of our show, and we're going to talk about what was the origin of this topic, 10 things white people can do to work for racial justice. Let's hear from Brandy Taylor.
Hi, and thank you for having me today. I want to read a quote from author Oren J. Sofer. Oren J. Sofer was inspired to write this blog because of an email he received. I quote, "I opened my inbox this morning and was dismayed to see this short message. This is exactly what I needed to hear right now. As a white man, I have been feeling so helpless and guilty this week and not knowing what to do. I will definitely hang on to your email and look at it a little bit when I need a little boost," Oren responded. "I'm glad my email was helpful. That was part of the intention. But if we all do is read an uplifting email or an article from time to time when we feel bad, then we'll have failed miserably in my attempt to encourage concrete action and address the continued and unintentional, horrific violence of racism." Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in his famous letter from Birmingham jail, called the danger of white complacency, "I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that Negro's great stumbling block and stride of action toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor of the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace when the absence of tension is positive peace with the presence of justice." White supremacy and racism are older than any of us. We didn't create the illness, but it's our responsibility to be part of the cure. There is no simple answer, no one thing for all of us to do, but there is something for each of us to do. Each of us has a role playing in the healing of the world. Loving well means caring for one another and standing up for justice. Stay a resource, bear witness, open your heart, and make space and feel what's there. There is a balance between making space with pain and discomfort and action. It is essential to give ourselves time to grieve, to mourn, to grapple with the complex feelings surrounding the brutality and the violence of racism. Particularly, if we are white, there's a way we can allow our advocacy to protect us from processing the awful implications of our own implicit role in societal system of racism, violence, and oppression. There are no simple, easy answers. Part of the healing must include the kind of radical transformation that only comes from deep soul-searching reflection and inner struggle. At the same time, if all we do is reflect and tend to our emotions, we fail to act. It's equally important to show up right here and right now where it counts. So if you're feeling stuck and helpless, here are 10 things that you can do to stand for justice, show solidarity, and take action to stop white and state-sanctioned violence. Now I'll give you back to Sabrina.
Wow, Brandy. Thank you so much, Brandy. That was so inspiring and empowering. We appreciate that message from Oren J. Sofer. So let's take a minute to go to our thriving women that have made a total commitment to review these 10 suggestions with our panel guests, Gina Marie Fasano, Rebecca Rayana Sang, and Abby Merkel, and the Thrive Tribe. Our mission today is to shine a light on the dire need for personal reflection and accountability on this topic of racism, very sensitive. This journey will be accomplished in 3 segments on our Thriving Women show. We'll have the same conversation next week with a panel of 3 white men, and the final week we'll have with a diverse panel of men and women. Thriving Women, we recognize the sense of urgency and the reason why these topics have risen to the top, even in light of the coronavirus pandemic. So we want to do our part because Black lives do matter. When we come back for a sponsor break, we'll begin the conversation on the 10 things white people can do to work for real racial justice. We'll be right back.
Thriving Women is sponsored by the Trendsetter Mentor Group, an exclusive membership for mentorship. TMG is an exclusive Facebook mentoring membership for thriving entrepreneurs with a culture of caring and sharing. TMG's mission is mentoring, inspiring, and empowering. And if you're a thriving entrepreneur and inspired to surround yourself with like-minded peak performers, join TMG's exclusive membership group on Facebook by sending a members request to the Trendsetter Mentor Group. We are your membership for mentorship. Back to Thriving Women Talk.
Welcome back, listeners, to the Thriving Women. Today's topic is 10 things white people can do to work for racial justice. I'd like to take this time to read this article to our guests to get their thoughts. Christian Rowe Finkenbeiner is the co-founder and executive director and CEO of momsrising.org. And this is really a grassroots organizing nonprofit that takes you on a most critical issues facing women and mothers and families by educating the public and mobilizing massive grassroots actions. Both her activism as at momsrising.org and her latest book, Keep Marching, How Every Woman Can Change Our World, it focuses on the idea that we can meaningfully fix sexism only when we also fight racism and economic inequality. It's amazing to put those things together in one sentence, isn't it? Kristen asked about the perfectionist instinct that many white women kind of struggle with and how it might affect our ability to engage in this meaningful conversation about race. Kristen brings up the concept of white tears. I'd never heard of white tears. As she describes it, it's the idea that when white women find themselves in kind of difficult conversations, instead of having this meaningful work, we often end up with what she calls these white tears. These tears are seen as some type of act of manipulation, a way to both garner unearned sympathy and to avoid meaningful discourse when it gets hard when we face these criticisms. What are your thoughts on this topic? Because so many white women are asking the right questions today, but are in fear of the answers. Do you find yourself challenged with these feelings? We're going to hear from Abby Merkel, Gina Marie Casano, Rebecca Rayana Sang. Stacy, can you give us some comments on this?
Yeah, I've never heard of white tears either, and so as I was listening to you putting, when you said all of those in a sentence, I'm like, oh my, this is it's so powerful, because if you look at it, from that perspective of how can we do this, it really is something that we need to focus as a culture in our families and in our homes. And I do know that it can be difficult when you're having these kind of conversations. Some people within your own family may not have the same opinions, and some people get triggered by things. So it is difficult and it is meaningful. And I don't know as far as active manipulation. I'm not sure, because I haven't personally been seeing that, but I do see that it's difficult. And it as far as when you're looking at criticism, it's a challenging topic.
Yes, it is challenging. And what other suggestions does she give? Abby, Merkel, Gina, Rebecca. So we can look at some of these comments here. Remember, these are some of their comments. Suggestions. This is not going to be easy. If this was easy to address, Kristen says our nations wouldn't have this rampant inequality that we have today. She actually writes that we remind one another that it's inevitably awkward and difficult, but keeps trying. Don't be afraid of this internal implicit bias. Be in conversation with them, she says. We haven't fixed or even found the right muscles. It's going to be what we call inelegant. This discomfort doesn't mean that we're actually harmed as white women. Furthermore, she says, because implicit bias is integrated fully into everything we experience in the U.S. and our very own culture. She acknowledges that it isn't something you fix, it's a work in progress, and I really like that. Take responsibility. Kristen says that we're going to make mistakes, and we do see that today. It's imperative that we own up to our mistakes, and we'll do it again. Those white tears, as we've heard, they're going to pale in comparison to the life and the death matters that many communities are facing today. Each and every day we face these issues. We all each have what we call blinders that impact our experience in the world. We see it through our own lenses, and it's true. We all see things through our own eyes. When we inevitably with ourselves, instead of feeling defensive and insulted or bursting into those tears, Kristen encourages, white women, they feel this sense of gratitude as if someone lets us know about our unintended impacts. Someone took the time out of their busy lives to actually open our eyes to something that was happening outside of you, she says. Abby Merkel, Gina Marie Casano, and Rebecca Rihanna Sign. So we're going to take a brief moment here of sponsor break as we will continue our discussion on 10 things white people can do for racial work here. We'll be right back.
Thriving Women Life Strategies is powered by Women Entrepreneurial Empowerment, commonly called WEE. The organization mission is empowering women entrepreneurs through a platform of visibility, education, and strategic growth and development within the networking arena. Their doors are open to women of all ages, millennials, new startups, small business, and those needing a boost. If you are committed to excellence and you want to know more about WEE platform, message founder Sabrina Protic on Facebook or email her at www.agelesstechniques.com. Back to Thriving Women Talk.
Yes, welcome back to Thriving Women. And I wanted to take a moment to go back for a second. I didn't know if any of our guests wanted to make a comment on some of the things I mentioned there earlier. Abby or Gina, Rebecca, we mentioned some of the things that were, this was not going to be easy. It's not going to be an easy work, taking a responsibility. Did any of you want to make a comment on that? Feel free to come in.
I would love to comment on that. Thank you for the opportunity. This is Rebecca Rihanna saying, and I just want to speak to this issue of white women tears because this is something that I have worked with for a long time, and I think that when white women are confronted with this situation, I myself, one of the things that comes up is it doesn't feel manipulative to us. We feel like we're in our genuine experience, and so when we receive the feedback that can feel manipulative to others, that can be really difficult to hear, especially because many of us have worked to become empowered around speaking our truth, speaking our voice, really having access to our heart and our emotions. And so I just want to name that it isn't the tears are bad, it isn't that the emotions are bad or that the shame isn't authentic. A lot of times this comes up when white women are feeling shamed and confronted with the heritage of supremacy that we're involved in. So what really this is about, I think, is about the time and the place. And so a lot of times what we can do as white women to support each other is to create a time and space outside of whatever the conversation is. Let's say we're in a community who's trying to grapple with the realities of racism, that we can work through our shame, we can work through our fears and all of those things. We can have our tears, just not in a meeting or in a space where it could hijack the conversation or where it can feel like the focus leaves where it was, let's say on a grieving black mother, and becomes about the white woman who's crying in the room. So to name that it's okay to have the experience of those tears, that our intention may not be manipulative, and we can also create a really great opportunity to go through that, just not in the time and space where it could feel like it brings attention away from what was already being discussed or what the work to be done is.
Excellent, thank you. I love that personal touch on that. What about some of our others? Gina, any thoughts on some of the things that we've talked about already?
Hi, yes, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. So, this is the first time that I've heard of white tears, and my initial gut reaction was it wasn't manipulation. It didn't feel that way, but sharing in the grief and pain. I also recognize that that's a part of my come from, like who I am as an identity, how I show up, looking for the best in others, right? And intentions, positive intentions. But it's also, I look at it like, how can we share the pain and support the process and the issue without being criticized, right? Because these difficult conversations or these topics that are emotionally charged are not easy. They're never going to be easy. But what if we look at it from a perspective of being worth it to have a conversation, whether we agree or not on the perspective? What if we were not afraid of the conversation, but instead afraid of not having conversation or not engaging? I believe that we're all going to be criticized at some point. We're all going to make mistakes, and it's what we do with those experiences that's going to help the human race move from surviving to thriving, right? I feel that our identity is formed based on our beliefs and our experiences going back through early childhood. And so how can we change our beliefs and then our experiences and our overall identity, how we show up? And that's through communication, effective communication, listening, learning, getting curious, asking questions, right? Showing up with openness and positive intention.
Excellent. You made a comment there about going back to your childhood, and I heard it said that, the generation that we're in today, it's really hard to make a change, but we can change our future generation. Mm-hmm. And it starts when we're young. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad you brought that point up. That kind of hits home as we have the opportunity now to shape these young minds. Mm-hmm. Let's hear from Abby.
So thank you very much for having me. This is Abby Merkel, and I tend to look at things a little bit differently, fortunately and unfortunately in the situation, but I am a law enforcement spouse, so it's been difficult on a lot of different levels for me, just based on the current situations. But yeah, this is definitely my first time hearing of white tears, and I don't see it as manipulation. I think, at least from my standpoint, it seems more of just like just feeling something different, and realizing that some of the upbringing or the environment that we live in just is not good. It's not healthy, and how do we fix it? How do we change it? I come from where it's like I have to be careful what I say, just because of, again, who I'm married to and what they're dealing with as well. So I have to be supportive in a lot of different ways, but it's definitely something that needs to be fixed, and I agree that it has to start at home. I think we need to change those that are coming up, in age, and we need to make sure that we're teaching our kids and others what hasn't been done right and what we have not been able to find a solution for, and that they, I wouldn't say are responsible, but they need to help figure it out.
I love that point, what hasn't been done right, because all too often we kind of cover that up, don't we? History books are famous for that too, covering things up. So appreciate your comments on that, and I want to remind our audience that we have a hot topic today, 10 things white people can do to work for racial justice, and we're so happy that we have our three guests that are weighing in on this matter. I'd like to ask our members of our Thrive Tribe at this point, Dana or Brandy, do you have any thoughts on what we've talked about so far?
Yes, Sabrina, this is Dana, and I do thank you for asking. Author Orion Sofer stated, as human beings, We have the power to uproot hatred and fear from our hearts, to dispel the ignorance in our minds, and to come to each other's aid in time of need. White supremacies and racism are older than any of us. We didn't create the illness, but it's our responsibility to be a part of the cure. There's no simple answer, no one thing for all of us to do, but there is something for each of us to do. Each of us has a role to play in the healing of our world. Loving well means caring for one another and standing up for justice. Stay resourced, bear witness, open your heart, and make space to feel what's there.
Wow, that was so powerful, Dana, and coming from the heart. I so appreciate that. Brandy, you have anything you want to lean in on? She may be trying to get unmuted here. Remember, we're talking.
I apologize for that. All right.
Go ahead, Brandy.
As author Ryan Sofer stated earlier, there's a balance between making space with pain and discomfort and action. And as they spoke about earlier, being biracial, I kind of have to come from both sides of it, and I have to make sure that I stay true to, both sides of my heritage, and at the same side, taking, time to think about what I'm saying and the presence of who I'm saying it in front of, and, being sensitive to everyone's emotions, because this is a very, very hot topic, and it makes a lot of people emotional. But just talking about it does nothing. So I feel like we need to, take action, and it does start at home. It starts with our kids, and it starts with educating our kids and instilling the right actions with them, the right beliefs with them, and stopping this right in its tracks and teaching our kids the right things so that we can change the future. This has been a problem for, decades, and I don't see it stopping if we just continue to just talk about it. People need to start making some actions. And that was something that author Ryan Sofer, was very adamant about speaking about, was taking action instead of just talking about these things.
Brandy, thank you so much for that. And you shared something personal about yourself, and I think I want to take the time to do that myself. This is a hot topic and a hard topic for my family because I am in an interracial marriage. And so my husband and I, we have some very frank conversations, and when people overhear us talking about these hot issues, they take a second look because they're like, are they really having this conversation? But we acknowledge the things that are going on in our world around us, and we see the injustice, and our conversations are more along the lines of this, what can we do to help? But we by no means hide or bury the issues. They're very hot. So in my circle, the conversations are going to look a little bit different in Brandy's and Dana's, our guests, because it depends on your circle and the people that you're communicating with, and also the people that are observing you and watching you. So yes, these are very, very hot topics. What can we do to to work towards this racial justice? I want to take a minute here to read something from Honorable Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., in his famous letter from Birmingham jail, called out the danger of white complacency and complicity. Writing from his Birmingham jail, he did this, and he said in August of 1963, he said, I've almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's greatest stumbling block in his stride towards freedom is not the white citizens, counselor of the Ku Klux Klan claner, but the white moderate, who's more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, and a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. I would love to hear your thoughts on this modern day application from our three guests. Abby, Gina, Rebecca, even Stacy. So, Abby, would you like to weigh in on this? Got some unmuting going on, or anyone that feels free that wants to come in on it. She's probably trying to come in. Stacy or Rebecca,
Yeah.
Gina,
Yeah,
come on in.
Yeah, I'm
The
happy
water's
to come in,
fine.
Sabrina. You know what?
Hey, the water's fine. Come on in. The water's fine.
Yeah, you know what? I just want to acknowledge, that you're talking about, sharing your home life too, because I think that's so important, and you talked about the circle, and how, the people that we're around, and that's what we see, right? And if we're only plugged into that circle or one news source, or just have that circle of friends, it's sometimes more difficult. Like you're having this difficult conversation, due to you and your husband's upbringing and cultural differences, right? That's not something that I have, because I'm not even married, but and
Right.
But we all have different things that could potentially trigger us, right? And create this tension. And what I love is what he's saying here is if you're not having the tension, right, then how can you really have this positive peace, right? So the presence of justice. So sometimes we have to have these kind of uncomfortable things in order to learn and listen, right? Because it's we want to just react a lot of times, but just really truly listening. That way we can learn, and then once we learn, then we can grow and share. And I think that's really the point of why everyone's here today.
Great point, Stacy. I kind of focused in on what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said when he talked about it's the white moderate, that more focused on order than justice. And while that person might look like the one that's going to make the change, in reality, it's stagnating us from change.
Yeah.
So I kind of thought that was an epic statement for me, is to see what do we really need to do is get uncomfortable. Like you said, is to get uncomfortable. We've got our guest here, and we certainly want to make sure we hear from them, Rebecca or Gina. I mean, we're bringing the old school to the new school. We've got these words from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and now we're comparing them and applying them to our day and time. And do you see any correlation or anything that we can learn from this? Or any of our Thrive Tribe?
Well, this is Rebecca again, and I'd love to speak to this. So I think one of the interesting things you see in our social media world a lot right now is so many images of Dr. King, with his peaceful protests, with him in his suits, everyone around him surrounded by suits. It's very tidy, it's very beautiful, and I have studied the words of Dr. King for a very long time. I was inspired by him when I was 17, and I memorized the I Have a Dream speech. I mean, I'm very passionate and have done a lot of nonviolent direct action. But what's interesting that we see about in this quote is he's talking about that complacency, the desire to have order, the desire to have everything be very tidy and very, easy to ignore, easy to overlook, that the white moderates do. And although he's speaking here in 1963, we can very much see this today when we look at the response that has happened over the last week or two to the Black Lives Matters movement, and a lot of people who are expressing their rage in very not tidy, not gentle ways, right? And what some of the criticism I have seen from my Black allies and from other people of color is like, please do not let your focus be on, say, riots. Don't let don't make it this demand be that our desire for justice be polite, be gentle, be what we see as compassionate. Like, there has to be a place for a certain amount of messiness. And 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 what I see here is really, for me, when I look at it, like, how can I create space in myself so that if I see something, say, on the news that's upsetting, that I foresee that I would never do, to make space in myself to say, okay, rather than look at this, what I'm seeing as this upsetting thing that I could never do, why don't I take a moment to really look at, am I being complacent? Am I wanting everything to be so palatable, and am I so focused on its niceness and its palatability instead of really looking at what's underneath, which is this really strong and focused desire for justice that Dr. King is talking about, as a white woman, order and things being tidy and things being polite really, really serves where I'm at. It really makes it possible for me to just go on living the way that I was living. And I think that what we see today in the streets is a desire for interruption, right? We need to interrupt the way things are so that there can be change. And, I'm not saying that we all need to go out and run out in the streets or protest or do anything else, but I think that we can get behind this desire to interrupt business as usual, the desire to interrupt really polite ways of doing things and really moderate ways of doing things so that real change can happen. And we can each do that in our own way.
Rebecca, that is phenomenal. I want to chime in on that a little bit. I was running to the store to get makeup, and I was told the mall was closed. Well, the mall was closed because of some of the protests. And so what is the point? The point is not that the mall was closed. It was disruptive. And now the mall owners are very aware now. If they hadn't been, if they kind of wanted to sweep this under the rug, they can't now because they've been impacted. They literally had to stop their commerce and stop their business. Now, not only was it the mall, but it was patrons just like me. Oh, so if you were trying to run from this, you can't run from it. Because like you said, Rebecca, it's messy. Some of it is going to be a little bit messy. But it's this messiness that's raising the awareness. And nothing happened at the mall, but it was this disruptiveness that created the awareness right here in my own backyard. And so this is what we're talking about with what's happening today. Anybody else want to lean in on that? Dana, Brandy, our guest?
Yes, Sabrina, this is Dana. And as we are streaming, George Floyd's family is actually taking part in his funeral service right now. So it's just a little more intense on the subject, and to reinforce that the Ku Klux Klan is a small segment, but the white moderate is a much larger segment. And it's not until individuals such as the mall owners and the others get uncomfortable with what we as African Americans have been uncomfortable with for forever. Is not until then, not until they start to feel our pain, live this story with us and become allies for change to happen. And our topic today it hit right on point, is relevant, and it's definitely significant. And we can't close our eyes. We can't avoid the uncomfortable conversations. We must speak our truth and be honest on how we feel, because this just didn't occur with George Floyd. This is an ongoing pandemic that has been affecting our lives for 400 plus years. But what I like most, and unfortunately this situation had to occur, is that we are all coming together and we're learning to love each other again, because for one, it starts at home, it starts in our hearts. And again, like you, Sabrina, I went to the store to get some towels. And I'm thinking, okay, the stores are closed. What? Why? But I realized there were protesters happening, and not all protesters are out there to riot and to wreck the stores, but you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if that small element is going to step in and shake up the mall. So I understand why the mall owners had to close, but like you, Sabrina, it interrupted my flow. It interrupted the flow of other people, and I'm thinking this is not going to happen. Not everyone is here to set fire on every building. This is a peaceful situation that's going on that we have to embrace, that we have to join in on. So again, I just say that it's not until those that have not been uncomfortable in the past start getting uncomfortable. And this situation with George Floyd and his murder is now making the world uncomfortable. And that's what's going to bring change. So thank you.
Excellent. Dana, did you want to make any other comments before we moved on about our author?
Yes.
Sabrina, this is Brandy. I did have comments that I want.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Brandy.
I wanted to add that I completely support all the peaceful protests. I love seeing people of all backgrounds, all races, when men, women, whoever, getting out and they're showing their support. And I've never seen more companies be in support. I've never seen more of my friends be in support of all backgrounds. I love it. But we have all got to put our heads together and come up with some ways to make this change so that it doesn't happen in the future. And that not only comes from changing the way that we do things, but I think that we need to contact our officials and, get some plans in action to have some changes made. And we need to really think outside the box with this so that we can really, this time, prevent this from ever happening again.
Excellent, Brandy. Thank you. I so appreciate these real world, real life comments. We're going to take a little shift right now. I want to go back to Stacy Soley, and we're going to get some more comments from her, some real open discussion on the 10 things that white people can do for racial justice. Stacy, can you cue us in a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sabrina. So this was an article that I came across when I was out just researching just for different ways. And I came across this by author Orrin J. Sofer. And, the first point really recommended is to educate yourself, which is, this is what we're doing right now, right? Educating ourselves, continue to do so. About all of the topics, whether it's whiteness, white supremacy, racism, anti-racist, just, all of the different things just to get education so that we can really learn, we can heal, and we can have this transformation to be able to help others. And the second topic was to discuss it, and that's what we're doing right now, discussing the anti-racism and things that we can learn from each other. Because a lot of times people will think, okay, yeah, it's great to kind of educate, but I don't want to talk about it. Like, this is uncomfortable. So, talking to friends about it, even if they disagree, and like we talked about, some family members not necessarily in agreement, but how can we learn? How can we find different sources of information from different people and different circles, like you said, Sabrina, so that we can have these discussions, and when we can start to soften ourselves and really open ourselves to having the discussion and not taking it personally, right? Just having these discussions, then we can take action, and we can start really showing up in a way that is more educated because we've learned some things, and we're not afraid to talk about it, even though we might fumble, which, that's okay. It happens, right? Because we're human. But yeah, I'd love to hear, Rihanna, if you want to share a couple of the things that you looked at that were really of interest to you.
Yeah, I'd love to. First, there's two resources that I just think are completely like required reading when we're starting to do this work. And I use the word required reading kind of jokingly. Obviously, we're going to all make our choices. But one would be the book White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. And this is specifically a book that is written, I would say, for the white audience. So it isn't to say that other people can't benefit from it, but it's really addressing like what comes up inside of us, the defensiveness, the fear, the kind of unconscious limiting beliefs that Gina referenced, all these things that we're not aware of that are there that can, in spite of whatever our intentions are, have the impact of being harmful, and how to work with them in a really intelligent and thoughtful, considerate way inside of ourselves. So I really recommend the book White Fragility. It's very, very powerful. Another resource I'd love to recommend is there's an amazing writer, podcaster, Instagrammer, influencer named Layla Salad, who wrote a book and has a podcast. And her work is really, again, about uprooting these hidden places of white fragility inside of us in the way we might be having an unintentional impact in ways that we can't see. So I think she's amazing and really want to just recommend people check out her work. Those are two I think that I can't recommend highly enough.
Thank you so much, Brianna. I kind of want to lean in on that a little bit. We can also talk to our kids about racism. That's one thing I think we mentioned that earlier, and educate our children. And also some people turn to faith leaders in the community. We see a lot of people, this is where they get their power and their strength from, and they turn to that. So, just some other ways that we're talking about these 10 steps that we can do. It said white women, but all of us can do for this racial justice. What about Gina? Gina, what do you think on this topic?
Hi, yeah, thank you. So talking to your kids about racism, it's all our responsibility to lead by example, right? These children are our future. Who they become will be based on their experiences and beliefs, starting back from what I mentioned earlier, the early childhood development. And since social media and smartphones became present, it's really no longer an option of not discussing racism and hate with children, right? So these kids can be exposed through friends, internet, or classmates. So in the absence of knowledge, kids, like all people, become vulnerable and susceptible to misinformation. And so then your beliefs and how you show up is based on false information, right? So before any conversation takes place, I encourage parents to explore their own feelings and prejudices. It's a really sensitive subject. Go in prepared, listen and share. Don't be afraid of saying the wrong thing or sending the wrong message. Be afraid of saying nothing and then having your children form their own beliefs based on biases and prejudices that are out there and they're hearing from social media or friends or others, right? Even the news, right? And so when you're talking about faith, if you're part of a faith community, talk to whatever your faith is, right? Talk to the leaders, get together. Have a supportive environment. We talked about this earlier. The environment is not a physical environment only. It's also who you surround yourself with. So look to your faith, because what helps us get through challenging times is faith. It helps us to find inner strength and resilience in times of uncertainty and weakness. It's about believing in something bigger than us, whether it's organized religion or spirituality, whatever it is that you believe in. Right? So having faith goes beyond our conscious mind, and for some it's through the organized religion or spiritual path, but regardless of what it is, having something to believe in or look to for inner wisdom guidance is essential for all human life. And being open to these conversations, especially those who have a different belief system. So many times I hear people saying, oh, I don't want to talk to them because they don't believe what I believe. Well, that's who you should talk to, but in a way that is effective. Get curious, ask questions, right? What is your intention for the conversation? So that's really important. And just being open to sharing not only your beliefs in a way that's not forcing it on others, but sharing your beliefs and getting curious about theirs and understanding, even if it doesn't change what you believe or what they believe, there's now an understanding and a connectedness. And I think that we need more of human connectedness.
Gina, that was very frank and to the point, and we so appreciate your insight on that. Here again, dealing with these very critical things that we can do to seek racial justice. Dana Washington, do you have any thoughts on couple other things we can do?
You know, again, we have to become an ally for each other. We have to learn each other beliefs and foundations, and we have to allow those to resonate with each other. We have to understand the religion background, the historical backgrounds of each other, but not from, and we have to be authentic. You know, a lot of times I have found my white counterparts, my coworkers, saying, Dana, I like you, right? And my thought process is, do you like me because we work together, we're both educated, we hang in the same circle? Because I saw you at the ATM machine and you didn't want to walk up because there was another black woman or a black man there. So we have to look at everyone as the same. I'm no better than another black female. So I think it's not until we start to just look at each other as the same, and we learn in our hearts that we all bleed the same way, we have emotions, and we start caring for each other and not looking at the world as black and white. We are all human beings. And when we could do that, this world would change.
Thank you so much. Stacy Soley, can you bring out, we were talking about the 10 things that we can do. What about shedding a little bit of light on getting involved and contacting our elected officials? Can you comment on that briefly?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, you know, the fifth step was really about getting involved, right? You know, can you find something locally or a national organization that is about racial justice and, you know, something that reflects your own values, right, and policy views? Because like we've been discussing, everybody is different, but there is ways that you can still get involved that are in alignment with your beliefs. You know, maybe you can donate or, you know, volunteer, right? Just looking at different ways. Maybe it's not something, you know, if you can do something financial, that's wonderful. But if it's not something, you know, is there something that you could volunteer your time in? Just, you know, like a lot of us are volunteering here, right? Just how can you, you know, get involved to be able to support, you know, to be able to support this in a bigger way. And then, yeah, the other one was about contacting your elected officials. So, you know, there are different ways that you can get in touch with your local or your county or your state or federal issues to urge systemic change, right? And, you know, depending upon what your beliefs are, you can still look at it. There's so many different ways that you can just use your voice. You know, maybe it's to vote on a petition. You know, the ACLU, for example, it offers numbers and guidelines. So just, you know, what are the different ways you can still, once again, be able to use your voice and to be able to connect and contact the elected officials. So those are just a few of the ways. I know that we want to take a look at some other things, Sabrina. We're on topics
Yes.
as well. Yeah.
Yes, so we were actually going through these 10, so we've got a few more, 7, 8, 9, and 10 that we want to cover just in case you're taking notes. So we're going to go down to grieve with other people. And so does anybody want to make a comment on that? Grieve with other people, and then let's see what that means.
Yes. Sorry, this is Abby.
Go ahead, Abby. Thank you, Abby.
Sorry about that. Yeah, definitely. With grieving is a hard word because it can mean so many different things. But when you are feeling emotions, especially with everything going on right now, you don't want to really share. I mean, you want to share those emotions, but you want to try and share those emotions and work through them with other white people, because Black people are already feeling enough pain as it is. And so they need our support, but we don't want to ask them for their support. They've got enough going on right now. So we need to ask for the support from others that, other white people that might be going through the same thing or feeling different. So we need to show our support to them, show the support to Black people as well. But we need to really lean on other white folks so that way we can offer the emotional support and physical support in other ways. The other topic, number 8, is geek out about racism. Any and every time you hear a remark or witness some act of racist overtones, don't be silent. You need to say something. You need to intervene safely, of course, but you want to promote zero tolerance for anti-Blackness in any way. You want to say something, not just sometimes, but every time.
Excellent.
And,
thank you.
Yeah, Brandy.
Thank you. Brandy? Brandy's going to cover 9 and 10. That'll bring it home for us.
Yes, we need to take cues from Black people. Listening to Black people and being willing to take your cues from people of color in leadership. Part of white supremacy culture and patriarchy is believing that we know best and that we can fix it. Instead, I think that we should recognize the oppressed groups often have unique and more accurate views of our society than those who benefit from the unjust, unequal structures of our society. So when I was saying kind of think outside the box, that means taking advice and recommendations from people of color if you're white, and so on and so forth, so that we can all come to a common solution for this together. And I think that we need to move forward together. You know, this isn't a white problem or a Black problem. This is everyone's problem. And I think that we all need to recognize that so that we can all move forward together as one. Another thing, number 10, is take care of your heart and stay resourced. Black people have been enslaved, murdered, and brutalized for over 400 years in this country. If you are white or have white skin privilege, it's our work to deal with the feelings of guilt and shame that arise from this in relation to this painful history. The more we take care of ourselves, the more available we are to be in fight for justice, equality, and healing for the long haul. And I've never been more happy to see the top-selling book, White Frugality, and the other books that help open these uncomfortable conversations about how do we talk about this? How do we implement change? How do we speak to people of color about this issue? If you're white, what can you do yourself to help alleviate this issue? And I love this. I love seeing this.
Brandy, that is awesome. I want to take a quick second, just in case our listeners were taking notes. We're going to cover those 10 real briefly. I'm going to go ahead and comment on them. Number 1 was educate yourself on racism and white supremacy. Number 2 is discuss anti-racism, family, friends, co-workers. Number 3, talk to your children about racism. Number 4, talk to your faith leader. Number 5, get involved. Number 6, contact your local officials. Number 7, grieve with other white people. Number 8, speak out about racism. Every time you see something happen or you witness an act, speak out against it. Number 9, as Brandy just covered, take cues from Black people and listen. Number 10, take care of your heart and to stay resourced. Read and keep abreast of these things. So we want to take this moment to thank all of our guests. We want to have some final thoughts from Abby, Gina, and Rebecca, we want to know how we can contact you. Abby, can you tell us how we can find you?
Sure thing. You can find me on Facebook. My website, unfortunately, is under construction, but my email address is abby, abi.merkle, M-E-R-K-L-E, at amdesignservice.com.
Excellent. Gina, how
Thank
can we
you.
find you?
Yeah, so I can be found at Gina Marie at mindshiftcoaching.com or through my website at mindshiftcoaching.com.
Thank you so much. And Rebecca?
It looks like she might have popped off of there, but I know that she is also on Facebook under Rebecca Rihanna Sang, and she has all their information there as well.
Thank you for that, Stacy. Again, we want to thank our guests. This is pretty much a really hot topic, pretty real. We dealt with some real issues that we face. All of us are facing. No one is unaffected. So again, we want to thank all of our listeners. We want to thank again our special guests, Abby, Gina, and Rebecca, and the Thrive Tribe, Dana Washington and Brandy Taylor. And a special thank you to Stacy Soley for inspiring us to share this hot topic today. Thanks to our producer, Daryl Johnson, and our engineer. Most of all, we want to continue our conversation on how we can continue to thrive while we're dealing with these hot topics and dealing with this global crisis. We want to thank you for taking this journey with us each and every week. We're Thriving Women Talk Show. We're powered by Trendsetter Mentorship Group, a membership for mentorship. You can follow us on our host Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're interested in joining the Trendsetter Mentorship Group or being a guest on Thriving Women Talk Show, email Daryl Johnson at npartners@yahoo.com. We believe you will continue to thrive. Thank you so much for being a part of Thriving Women Show today.
You can follow all of our hosts on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're interested in joining the Trendsetter Mentor Group or being a guest on Thriving Women Talk, email Daryl Johnson at npartners@yahoo.com. We believe you will continue to thrive, not